Welcome back into the All Things Mizzou podcast presented by Missouri Tigers on SI. Joey Van Zummeren joined as always by Michael Stamps to recap week 3 of fall camp for the Missouri Tigers. A very interesting week at that. The most insight we've gained on this team. And I would say our biggest questions going into fall camp have now been answered at this point. Obviously, not the quarterback battle, but the offensive line specifically of being our biggest question mark for our position group as a whole. And now we have some surprising answers there, I would say. So, Michael, just what have been your top thoughts from this eventful week for Missouri?
Yeah, some of the names being thrown around in the offensive line competition were certainly not ones I anticipated seeing the field, but it doesn't not make sense because they've been around for 3 or 4, I guess, 4 years now. And they've been, in the offense. They've been with Brandon Jones. They've been with Ryan Russell, and obviously Coach Drinkwitz, and the rest of the staff and support staff. So it doesn't not make sense that they'd be ready to go and they've matured their bodies and understand what their roles are. So it makes sense. I think it's really easy to slot in some of these transfer guys who have high ceilings or potential or things that we view as potential. But it takes time to adjust and acclimate. I mean, you look at Johnny Williams and Javen Richardson. I think those are players with what we view as high ceilings, but they haven't played a ton of football or a ton of high level football yet. It takes time to adjust to playing in the SEC and the expectations and the speed at which Mizzou plays at. So yeah, interesting to talk about. I'm excited to talk about it. Definitely some names that I don't think any of us were expecting, but kind of like I said, it doesn't not make sense. It's again surprising, but it's a reasonable thing. So definitely very interesting.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, let's get to those surprising names. The main one being Curtis Peagler at right guard. So, Eli Drinkwitz had said going into the week that they were going to make some changes on the offensive line this week. And he said that he was responding to a question being asked about if Javen Richardson had secured the starting left tackle job, because from at least what I had saw on the practices open to the media, it was just Javen at left tackle, no Johnny Williams. So it seemed like Javen pretty much was going to win that spot. And Drinkwitz pretty adamantly said, no, like that's not a secure job. We're going to try some new things out on the offensive line next week, see if we can find a different combination. And so, what my mind went to, I think what everybody's mind went to was, okay, they're going to give at least Johnny a chance to go with the ones at left tackle, and they're going to give maybe they'll swap out Dominic Giudice for Jalen Early at right guard. Um, and so instead, they move over Caden Green to left tackle, they move Giudice over to left guard, and they slot in Curtis Peagler at right guard. And like you said, Michael, if you were to ask me to give you a list of like top 5 surprise candidates to watch in fall camp, Curtis Peagler would certainly not be on that list. Tristan Wilson probably would not be either. Um, but I would say I was thinking about this with the offensive line specifically. It is pretty difficult to really gauge how anybody besides the top 5 or maybe 6 are doing at any point in time, because when we see these practices, whether it's in the spring or the fall, I mean, we see maybe a one-on-one rep a few times against a defensive tackle or an edge rusher, but we are not seeing these guys in live action at all. We see the first 2 lines sometimes if we can get a good look at it. And then also in the early games, even though these guys play, like, I mean, one, I think offensive line is probably the most difficult position to evaluate, just as a average viewer or even a beat reporter. It's not like wide receiver where you can see, oh man, that guy had a few really good catches. The same goes for when we're watching these guys in practice. We're watching, what we get to see a lot more is the wide receivers, pass catchers, skill position players. So if it's a lot easier at the wide receiver position, if there was a redshirt junior who has been, maybe in the second lineup for the past few years, it'd be a lot easier to say, hey, you should keep an eye on this guy compared to the offensive line, where even when they're in the second lineup, it's like, what does it really mean to be one of the best 10 offensive linemen on the team? Um, so that's what I would say as far as Curtis surprising arc, because like you said, I agree with you. It is surprising. It's not a name we expected to hear in this, but um, it it makes again, it's logical as to why it's a surprise, really. And like Coach Frinkwitz said yesterday after practice in Lindenwood, that Curtis has not only has he physically grown a lot, but also has put together the fundamentals, and so putting those two together can seems like he's really hit his stride and developed the way they wanted to. And so with this, I asked, so I mean, there's Peagler, then there's Green, Judice. I'm not really. It makes sense that he's switching over and has the ability to do that. We've talked since he transferred over from Michigan that he's a versatile piece. Um, with Green is also the other big surprise here. Um, so with Caden and this offensive line as a whole, Michael, do you think this is a concern that they are changing these pieces around less than 2 weeks before the start of the season?
I'll get to that in 1 second. One thing I want to add is one, I feel like I'm at the point now where I can tell if Eli Drinkwitz is just, hyping a player up to hype him up, or if it's truly like a valid, um, like a valid claim and what he's saying, like there's some smoke to it. I mean, this is not him just hyping up Curtis Peagler. I mean, he's probably going to play, so don't think it's just him calling him a good player. So that's probably pretty logical. And the other thing as well, I feel like I'm at the point too where I trust it because if he's going to say Marquise Gracie's playing good, well, Missouri has a good offensive line, so they test each other, and Missouri's defense is also very good. So I feel like in practice these guys are getting good runs. So I trust it if he says someone's playing well. To your question, our job is not to overreact. So I don't want to overreact. But it has to be a little bit concerning, right? Um, Especially when I think, at least from the outside, we felt like we had a decent idea of what things were going to be going into this. And even up until a week ago, I think we still had a decent idea. And it's concerning that guys like Javen and Johnny and Jalen Early might not be ready for whatever role that we thought they would assume would be. That might honestly be the largest concern. Um, but Drinkwitz talked a little bit on Saturday about positional versatility, and it's like he said, it's just getting the best five guys out there. And if someone starts to play well, they can gel them into a new position, or they can adapt to a new position. I mean, with Caden Green, we've touched on this, multiple times in the past. Like he started as a left tackle at Oklahoma. He's more than capable of doing it. I'm sure it took a couple days to get acclimated again and stuff like that. But so I'm not exactly worried about Caden at left tackle, but there are some chemistry things that go along with that as well, and swapping people out and things like that. So it definitely is a little bit concerning. It also still tells me, I mean, I believe he said that he's confident in what they have, or they're getting more confident, but clearly there's this level of uncertainty and a lack of confidence if they're making these changes so close to the start of the season. So it kind of tells me that they might not be fully certain, or as certain as they say they are, if they're still making some of these changes. So yeah, definitely a reason to be concerned. There definitely is more clarity now, and it seems like we have the group of guys, that we're going to see this season. But yeah, certainly reason to be a little bit nervous. I'm really interested to see, what kind of happens with Javen and Johnny now. If this is the five that rolls out on day one, is I assume Javen's backing up Caden at left tackle and Johnny probably backing up Keegan at right tackle. But what does that mean for their futures and things like that. Obviously, that's not, priority right now, but it does make you wonder. Javen's this is his second year with the team. I kind of expected him to be ready. I mean, he was in a quote unquote position battle last fall against Marcus Bryant and didn't win. So maybe there's some concern there. I don't know. It'll be interesting to track. But in a long roundabout way, Joey, yes, there is some viable reason to be concerned.
Yeah, and so like you said, Drinkwitz said yesterday that it's ridiculous to worry about the shuffling along the line. Um, I take his perspective into account. What I would say is that at the very least, this was not their first plan, um, and so but I would hesitate to say. I mean, I would say like in an ideal world, like sure, Javen Richardson or Johnny Williams is just where you would like them to be at as a coaching staff. The same thing goes for Jalen Early, but really, in an ideal world, you just have a good offensive line. That's all they're looking for, and not really concerned of who's out there per se. Um, but again, this is not their first plan. So I wouldn't say my concern is, oh, how is Caden going to do at left tackle? Do they have anybody out? Do they have? And if Caden's at tackle, do they have a second guard that can play? I'm not so much concerned about that. I do, like you said, I trust what Eli Drinkwitz is saying about Curtis Peagler, and I trust in the same way that Eli Drinkwitz has confidence in Brandon Jones. I have confidence in Brandon Jones to figure that out. I'm more so concerned of, I mean, one, the fact that it's a completely different group. Um, I mean, there's only one new player in there, but there's three changes overall. And we hear all the time of how important for an offensive line it is to establish that chemistry. Although Caden Green said when I asked him about it a few weeks ago that this group has pretty easily established that chemistry pretty quickly, although that was when it was that first lineup. So again, I think the offensive line is going to be fine. Again, I have confidence in this coaching staff, but again, it is certainly not their first plan, and that's obviously not a good thing for one players at an individual level, and then just evaluating it also as a whole. Um, Maybe the job of this offseason of being able to replace that talent. Now, ultimately, if they're able to get a good five out there, and maybe Jalen, and Johnny, even if they're not ready to be starters, can be good backups, and they seem to like Tristan Wilson also as a backup for the interior, all three of those spots. Then at the end of the day, none of this matters. None of this concern really matters. Um, I think there is an interesting part though too of what we've both hit on, as far as like this certainly does not spell good things about Javen, Johnny, and Jalen. Um, what I would say though is I don't think we should be completely dismissive of Curtis Peagler possibly just being a really good player. Again, we don't have any idea besides the 38 snaps he took against Murray State last year. So I think again, we can't completely doubt the guy. From my reading of it, though, basically, and this is pretty much what Drinkwitz had said, is we hear all the time coaches talk about wanting to find the best five on the offensive line, and so they determined, okay, our best five are Caden, Connor, Keegan, Dominic, and Curtis Peagler. The problem is, okay, we have three guards there. Well, that's great. Then Caden can slide over at left tackle, and we feel fine with that. I want to hit on Caden playing at left tackle a little bit more, but mainly as far as Javen, Johnny, and Jalen, the three J's. What a lot of people have been talking about is the fact that all three of those guys were transfer portal additions. At least two of them. I mean, I guess with Jalen, it was okay. He's definitely going to have to compete. He's going to have to earn it over Dominic, but he was going to at least compete for it and be not the third or fourth guy in that competition like it seems he is now. Are you, Michael, concerned not about we've talked about concern about the offensive line as a whole, but is it a bad thing that Javen included in this because he was transfer portal get a year ago, that it seems like they somewhat just struck out on these 3 transfer portal gets?
You know, it's kind of a yes and no. I mean, one thing I was gonna say, you kind of segued into it. I really like. I do appreciate the fact that Drinkwitz, Brandon Jones, and this coaching staff aren't like forcing these transfers into the starting lineup. I feel like you see that in both college football and basketball, that they get these big name players who they might have paid a lot of money for, and they feel obligated to play them. I mean, you still have to earn your spot. So I do appreciate that. I mean, again, it's yes and no because we were viewing these people as guys who could contribute, but Johnny Williams is young and hasn't played a lot of football, and Jalen Early was just kind of a rotational guy, right? And Jacob Richardson was a JUCO guy, so we are expecting these guys to contribute, but maybe we're putting too high of expectations on them for their first season, especially with Johnny. I think again, really high ceiling guy. It would definitely be out of those 3, it'd be the most unfair to Johnny Williams to say that they struck out just because he's so young. He still has a lot of football to play. Um, I could have. I think we all could have pointed at Johnny Williams and said he's not going to start this season again because he's still so young and has to take that next up in competition and just get adjusted and everything like that. So, not surprised that Johnny is it. Not that he's not competing, but more than likely, not going to start. But I mean, Javen is certainly a concern. Like I said earlier, because he's been in the program now for 2 years and he should know what the deal is. He played behind Marcus Bryant, who was more than solid and has had plenty of these guys around him. He's played, or he's had Caden Green around and Connor Tolson around, and all these guys. Um, I'm not going to say I expected him to like run away with the job, but it was easy to point at him and say, yeah, I think he's probably going to start, assuming everyone plays their natural-ish position. So Javen is concerning, and then Jalen Early as well. Maybe we're just putting too high expectations on these guys. That's the more optimistic viewpoint. But he was a contributing player at Florida State, and it was the same expectation here. So maybe on the more optimistic side, maybe it's too soon to say, but at the same time, they are brought in to fill holes. And if they're not filling those holes right away, kind of like everyone thought they were, then, like I said, reason to be concerned. So maybe I'll backtrack what I said a little bit earlier and say maybe we need to be a little more patient with some of these guys, especially Johnny Williams. Javen Richardson, definitely reason to be concerned. Jalen, maybe it's a little bit too early, but at the same time, he's experienced and a little bit older. It is safe to say that he should be able to play, and clearly he's not ready. So definitely reason for concern there as well. But maybe we could be a little bit more patient / optimistic.
I think that's very fair. The point of when when the fan base and media reacts to these transfer portal accusations, we're all pretty quick to put on a label for what these players are designated to do. Like you said, as far as we say, okay, this is the replacement for this guy. This guy is going to compete for this starting job. But the coaching staff could very well have a completely different idea in them. I mean, Johnny Williams could very well be, just living up to their expectations that they had of them, and just that was unequal to what media and the fan base expected of them. So I agree with you on Johnny. Jalen, it's interesting because like, man, they just based off of what he did at Florida State, at least as far as the playing time he got. Maybe we're reading, the evaluation of him wrong, though. That it's a little bit more concerning, and especially for Javen. Again, it's a little bit difficult just because of the fact that he's coming from the JUCO level, so a lot more unpredictable. But still, I go back to their first plan was to have one of Javen or Johnny at left tackle, mainly Javen as the main option. So there's a lot of people thinking this is a concerning part of how the coaching staff evaluates players that they're adding through the transfer portal. I would say again, I think this is still a very difficult space to really scout players in, especially when you don't have a lot of playing time for some of them, especially at the SEC level. So obviously, yeah, I mean, you want it to be better, but again, I agree with you that maybe just us on the outside had too high of expectations compared to what the coaching staff had.
It's also worth noting that Jalen Early was a spring portal edition, so he's had less time than the other two dudes we're talking about. So that also makes a difference. And I feel like Eli Drinkwitz established pretty early and made it pretty clear um, at the very beginning of fall camp that it was going to be an adjustment process for Jalen Early. Starting him at guard, his natural position. We're going to start him at guard and all that stuff, and let him kind of adjust and work his way into things. So maybe we just need to be more patient, but at the same time, I think it's reasonable that we give these transfers these expectations and these labels that they're going to fill X position and Y position, because when they're coming from power conference programs and they've played even a decent amount or a lot, like Jalen Early, like it you know makes sense that we expect them to fill a void somehow. um I think this is where like people get mixed up, and probably us included, get mixed up in the star ratings, and they're ranked this nationally because Curtis Peagler, I just had it pulled up, was ranked like 1,400 in the country in that 2022 class. But he's had 4 years to develop, and now he might be ready. So just because Jalen Early was a 4-star transfer doesn't exactly mean that he's any more or less deserving to play than Curtis Peagler. And I think we kind of give Jalen Early, or a player in that situation, the benefit of the doubt because they're coming from a big school and we're a high ranked recruit and all that stuff. So that's a different argument for a different day. But yeah, definitely, I think some of the labels we put on these guys coming in makes sense, but uh, maybe there needs to be a little bit of a waiting game too. But at the same time, they're expected to fill these voids, so it's kind of a yo-yo situation, kind of hard to pinpoint, I feel like.
Oh, right, exactly. And so the other part of this that people have brought up is, well, if you're bringing in transfers and then they're not starting and you're benching them, what is that? Are you going to scare away other transfers? And people have said the same thing about the quarterback competition and with Bo Prabula of how are you going to be able to recruit anybody else in the transfer portal if he's losing the competition and you're not playing him, even though you're paying him a bunch of money, which like I just think college football players are not a particularly insecure bunch of young men, especially those who are entering the transfer portal and getting offers from the SEC. Now, it's on the coaching staff to be honest with them. I would hope, just for ethical sakes, moral sakes, that the coaching staff told Bo Prabula when they were recruiting him, like, hey, we have Sam Horn. We think he can be a starting quarterback too. Like, you're going to have to compete with him just because of the nature of the. Um, I mean, I think it's going to get better with the house settlement now in play, but like, not right now the players have a lot of leverage, but still, again, I would hope they'd be honest with Bo Prabula and the other players that they're bringing in. But again, at the end of the day, this is not an insecure group of men. I think if they're told that they're what they have to do to get playing time is compete and just simply earn the job, I don't think that's going to scare them away. And if you're continuing to win, like I think you're going to be able to recruit at the transfer portal at the same exact level. And so yeah, and the best way to make that decision, the best way to keep on winning is by making those right decisions. If anything, I think if you're a transfer, it'd be more alluring. Maybe you're worried, oh, like, I mean, I just can't get over the idea of the fact that a player who's entering the transfer portal has an offer from an SEC school would see the fact that before like in years previous that players have transferred here and that they didn't get playing time because they didn't earn it. And so future transfers would be like, oh, I don't want to go there because I don't think I can win the job. That just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, you like just took the words right out of my mouth. Like most of these guys want to compete, and I also don't think like I don't think Eli Drinkwitz and his staff are going to want a guy who wants to transfer to Missouri, but he's like comes in with the attitude of, "Oh, I'm just going to be a starter, and that's that, and I don't have to work very hard." You know, you'd kind of think that most of these guys want to go compete from the get go, and I feel like that probably brings out the competitive spirit a little earlier. In the process of the off season because these guys are waiting, months before they actually get on the field. So getting in a positional battle probably gets them excited, get a little competitive before the season even starts. But yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't think Eli Drinkwitz is gonna. They're not gonna want to take a guy who thinks he's gonna walk in and make a whole bunch of money and start right away. You got to be crazy if you think there's not going to be some sort of competition. And again, I said this earlier. I admire the fact that um, Drinkwitz is not afraid to evaluate all of his options, take a look at everyone, and they're not going to force these transfers into the lineup. If Curtis Peagler has truly earned a starting spot, which at this point it seems like he has, or some sort of rotational role or whatever that's going to look like. I don't want to say he's going to start yet. We don't, anything could happen. But if he's really earned it, then he's going to play. And Jalen Early has to go earn his spot. Johnny Williams has to go earn his spot. Javen has to earn his spot. Like I think that's pretty admirable. He's not the. I'm not saying he's like the only coach in the world who does this. I'm not on any sort of high horse, but it's definitely a sign of a good coach where he's willing to give anyone a shot, and the best player is going to earn the spot. So
Right. And yeah, again, he's definitely someone, as all coaches are, of saying that every spot is up for grabs, every place there's a competition. But there are some spots where we can definitely see that. And again, they decided that Curtis Peagler is one of their 5 best offensive linemen, so there he is in the lineup.
yeah, that's definitely a coach's cliche, and I feel like he says that every year, but he was not wrong this time around, was he? He was not wrong. He was not wrong at
Right.
all.
And I think what other people have brought up with this too is that from the donor's point of view, is there going to be upset people, the people that are paying for these contracts, are they going to be upset seeing the fact that their investment isn't seeing the playing field? Specifically, people have brought that up with Peagler, and I think we've talked about this before. But again, to me, I think a lot worse of a crime if I was paying big money to a college football school. A worse crime than a coach not playing the players that were I paid for would be um force basing decisions off of that, really. And so, I mean, if Sam Horn goes out there and yeah, I mean, winning cures all. If Sam Horn goes out there and is a good quarterback, then there's no problem with it. So that's that. And as far as the quarterback competition with the whole thing, again, we've talked about a few times how, like, at this point, I think if Sam Horn is a better player, he's going to go out there and play, and that I don't think NIL is going to play into it. Um, and we're into week 3 now, and my whole point with this quarterback competition has been like, even behind, well, I say behind closed doors, but in the scrimmage, like that was like originally not open to the media, and then surprisingly loud. Like the fact that Sam and Bo are still splitting snaps evenly, like it would not make sense to play up a quarterback battle and then for half of the snaps with the ones have a guy that is not going to be your starter taking the ones. Now, if you want to criticize Eli Drinkwitz for not making a decision early enough, I mean, sure, you have some stuff you can go with there, but also like if if he were to make a decision after week 1 of fall camp, or if he were to decide that Bo Peagler was going to be the starter as soon as he transferred here, and then Bo Peagler goes out there and was not good, then I think, again, it would be a lot worse of a crime for him to rush that decision. So that's that.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah. Again, he's he's earned the trust of uh us, the media, and he's earned the trust of his fans. I feel like you just have to trust the process a little bit and hold out hope, I guess, that he's gonna make the right decision. I mean, I feel like at this point, like you said, that this is not, it's not a smokescreen. There is a genuine quarterback battle, obviously, and I don't think. I mean, I don't think they know who's, if there's a front runner right now. I doubt they know who's gonna play against Central Arkansas or start, I guess. Um, so it's a true quarterback battle. Not really much to say, but I kind of like the mystery almost. It's kind of exciting that, I mean, obviously there's concern, but it's still kind of exciting that we don't know who it is. And we talked about this last week too, that uh, it doesn't seem like it's a bad thing that there isn't separation. It seems like that they're both playing well, especially after what he said on Saturday. That the turnovers have been limited, and statistically, they're both great, and they're both still so even. So at this point, it's not a bad thing that they haven't uh, named one, and it kind of seems at this point that when they do name a starter, that that guy would have had to go above and beyond what they're already doing at some level. So I guess in some ways, when they name the starter, it's going to be obviously to be reassuring, but like that guy had to have done something at at a much higher level than what they were before. So yeah, not a we talked about this last week a little bit, but not a bad thing that they haven't named a guy yet. And it seems like they both keep getting more, glaring and glaring positive reviews. So still not a bad thing at all.
Right, and I think at this point, I would, unless uh, Eli Drinkwitz like knows his starter right now and has known it for the past week and has just not been public with it. Uh, Unless that's the case, then I would not expect to hear it the starting quarterback be announced over the next week. The week before that first game, maybe Drinkwitz announced it on a press conference, or maybe it's leaked out through Pete Thamel or Pete Nakos, one of the other Pete's. Um, like I would expect it to go into week one of the season, and in that week one game, I mean, it would be really interesting how they go about it, as far as splitting the time up. I mean, one the biggest question would be like, if you go into that game and you name a starter, then what happens if your starter is bad and the other guy is really good? Um, that would be interesting. And then also, I would hope, just based off of how 2023 went, but also Drinkwitz has admitted that that quarterback competition in that year was not as pure as this one is. Like, I just hope it wouldn't be split up by half, so one guy gets 23 pass attempts and the other 5. So, yeah, interested to see. Look, I mean, the quarterback competition, yeah, we've talked about all fall. It's all that anybody's talked about all fall, but like for the most part, the past 3 weeks, for what the media has been able to see, there's been nothing really revolutionary to report on it. All right. Now, with the offensive line settled, basically, I would say there's really only two true starters that I'm unsure about as far as who are they going to be. There's definitely more questions as far as like, what is this rotation going to look like? Is a little bit going to actually get playing time? What's this guy's role going to be in the defensive rotation? But as far as the top 22, we're pretty certain on, I would say, all but two positions. If assuming that offensive line is settled, it's quarterback, and then I would say defensive line between Sterling Webb and Marquise Garcia for that second spot. Um, Michael, is there any other that jumped to you that we're unsure on?
No, it seems like he's pretty solid in the cornerback situation now with Norwood, Pride, and Stephen Hall. So that seems to be settled. I think he actually said that word for word last week. So no, I can't think of anything. Like you said, the rest is just depth stuff and kind of, I guess, predicting, who's going to play where, which freshman's going to play. I mean, there definitely still is some depth stuff to sort out, and I don't think that's going to be something that's like I mean, usually not something that's solidified really ever. Kind of whoever's playing better is going to get the run, and I think the defensive ends are a really good example of that. I mean, they have so many guys who can do so many different things, and you add Dayton Hopkins to the mix now, who got more glaring reviews um, on Saturday at the end of week 3. Jason Dowell, another one who's got complimented, and Javion Hilson as well. So just adds more to the mix. Nothing wrong with a little bit of depth. With the defensive tackles, I actually think this is probably more of a toss up than people think. It's probably not getting enough attention because, and again, just because we haven't heard Sterling Webb's name much doesn't mean he's not in contention to start. He probably fits into the they played a lot of football in their career and we want to arrest them category, which seems to be something he likes to repeat with guys like Connor Tolson, Jalen Catalon, and all that stuff. So Sterling Webb probably fits into that category a little bit, but if Marquise Gracial is the super improved player, one of them seems like maybe one of the most improved on the team. If that's really the case, it seems like he's gonna have a shot to be the number 2 there or rise into that position at some point. So that'll be one to keep an eye on. I feel like it's kind of hard to evaluate at the moment. Similar with the offensive line, we just haven't really seen much yet, and might be one that goes into a couple weeks before there's any change or we know for sure it's Sterling. I would imagine that Sterling probably, assuming he's healthy, probably starts against Central Arkansas, and they could rotate throughout. And then, beyond them, there's obviously a lot of depth that they have to sort out too. But yeah, it's kind of similar to the offensive line, where it's kind of hard to evaluate who's doing well and who's not outside of what we're hearing. So that'll be an interesting test against Central Arkansas to see how that shakes out. We're going to be watching that Central Arkansas game like hawks. There's actually going to be a lot to take away from that, which I guess is fun in some ways. But yeah, we're going to be watching Central Arkansas more intently than I think we probably realized.
Yes. That's what I've been thinking the past few weeks, just like of all these questions of fall camp. Again, we're pretty set on the top 22 outside of 2 positions. But then more so, yeah, finding out those 2 positions, but also, I mean, one, just to actually see a lot of these new guys play, even if it is against Central Arkansas, but also then, like, what does this defensive rotation look like? So I'm excited for it, because I was thinking the other day, like, the most exciting part for NFL preseason, and although they get to see a lot more in training camp than college does and fall camp, but the most exciting part about reporting on the NFL preseason is who is cornerback number 6. So not that there's more pressing and important questions than that we'll actually get to see in Central Arkansas. So excited for all of it. And then obviously we don't need any other reason to be excited for week 2. So on this kind of similar note, as far as taking away from fall camp, there's 2 more practices that we'll get to watch. Wanted to talk about things that we've taken away as far as anything that we're more worried about since the start of fall camp, and on the flip side, anything that we're more confident on. For me, I wouldn't say there's any huge worries outside of the offensive line that I've grown on. Again, the only one big question that I've gained since the start of fall camp is defensive tackle. But if anything, there's a lot more position groups that I've gained more confidence on just from seeing the players there, but also hearing from the coaches. The 3 I had there were wide receiver and cornerback. I think we've talked about before, probably in our position power rankings, of like the wide receiver position is somewhat of a gamble because you have Kevin Coleman and then a lot of guys that have never played before, but hearing Coach Drinkwitz's confidence in them and then seeing them on the practice field, I have no doubt that Marquise Johnson, well, I shouldn't say I have no doubt, but I'm confident that Marquise Johnson, Joshua Manning are going to make the steps they were expected to, and that Donovan Olubade is going to be ready as we expected him to. I also list, and then corner, just the fact that they seem fine with either Pride or Hall there seems like a good sign. And then at linebacker as well, I think I had them as my second best position. in our positional power ranking. So I've always been confident in this group. But again, just the fact that it seems like Nick Rodriguez, we haven't heard as much about Jeremiah Beasley, but definitely Nick Rodriguez took the step they expected him to. Josiah Trotter comes as advertised, and that will linebacker depth really stepping up, especially, I mean, Khalil Jacobs. I would say, I've always been a fan of what Khalil Jacobs can do. Like what he did last year, but he really surprised me for how much we heard about him, for how much we heard Coach Drinkwitz talk about him having an expanded role, and then also the fact that he was voted by as a captain, which we'll talk about in a little bit here. Is there anything that sticks out to you, concerns or things that you've gained more confidence in since the start of fall camp, Michael?
Honestly, the entire defense. Even I think we can question defensive tackle, but it's really should be more of a positive because Marquise Gracial has improved as much as they says he has. Like I feel like that's should be viewed as a positive. And then there are like 8 guys in that room who all might have a genuine shot to play. Like we sometimes forget about Justin Bodford, Elias Williams, Sam Williams. I mean, there's Jalen Marshall, like so many players there. That Jason Dowell is a guy who's been getting mentioned recently as well. So I I wouldn't say I'm concerned about defensive tackle, more just curious because we saw what Sterling Webb can do last year, and he'll probably play more or could play more this year. So I feel like I can safely say I trust Sterling Webb. And then again, if Marquise has really improved as much as he has, it's just friendly competition. So nothing wrong with that. But yeah, I mean, I feel like we can run down the entire defense and at each position and mention one guy that Drinkwitz has said has stood out. Like at the safeties, he talked about Mose Phillips, Caleb Flagg, and Santana Banner on Saturday, and he's mentioned all 3 of those guys multiple times. Those are depth pieces, so there's plenty of depth there. I mean, at the defensive ends again, Dayton Hopkins, JBN Hilson have received plenty of compliments, and on Saturday as well. He mentioned Brian Huff and Jeremiah Beasley. Brian Huff probably going to be a special teamer. Jeremiah Beasley probably going to contribute there as well. So, I mean, really, the whole defense is kind of has been an area I'm more confident in because it seems like the depth there is genuine and really solid. So, I'm not surprised that I'm more confident in the defense. I think on paper they look a lot deeper, even before the fall. So not really a surprise to me, but just based off everything he's been saying and everything we've heard from the players and stuff like that, I think just generally the entire defense I have much higher confidence level in.
Absolutely. All right. Final thing to round it off here. They announced their captains yesterday. The most interesting thing about this is that it was that both Bo and Sam were voted captains. Honestly, it's not too surprising. I mean, your quarterback is going to be a captain. And so they don't have a starter yet. If anything, I would say, I mean, I don't know when the team actually voted on this, but I mean, at the very least, yeah, I mean, the team hasn't been told or hasn't been decided on a starting quarterback either. And hey, I mean, I think obviously it's a good thing that their teammates think highly of both their leadership. And then outside of that, there's honestly no surprises for this. I mean, if you were to tell me to predict a special teams captain, I probably would have predicted Blake Craig and not Logan Muckey. But just going to online, there's Bo, there's Sam, Connor Tolson, Caden Green as the other 2 offense captains. Again, zero surprises there. Exactly who I would have predicted. I mean, it is good for Caden to be a captain as a junior. You have Zion Young, Dalen Carnell, Khalil Jacobs, Jalen Catalan on defense. We've heard Drinkwitz talk about Khalil Jacobs' leadership over fall camp. And then finally, Logan Muckey on special teams again. So, I mean, Logan, all I can say about him is he brings energy every practice. I mean, he was frat flicking, if you're familiar with that, the other day in practice when they were playing house music and doing a few other dances and getting his wide receiver teammates lively. So good for Logan. I mean, he's definitely a lunch pail guy. He's a walk-on still graduate who, just looking at it yesterday, has started on special teams for each of the past 3-4 years. So those are the captains. Any Thoughts on those?
No, nothing surprising. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say. It's not surprising. You can answer this question for me though. Is 9 captains like a larger amount than usual?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
For Missouri and then college football, the sports as a whole, yes.
Yeah, I was gonna. That's what I thought. I think there were 6 last year and 5 the year before, so there's
Yeah,
something like that. Um, and obviously naming 2 quarterbacks, and I don't think there was a true special teams captain the last 2 years off the top of my head.
correct.
So that would knock 2 players off the list. But yeah, um, not really surprised. I will say it's nice to see Jalen Catalon on there as a transfer. I know he's more experienced than anyone else in the game of college football, but it's not. It's definitely a positive sign. I talked to a lot of the safeties and Jacob Yora at media day a couple of weeks ago, and they all said he was more of a lead by example guy, and that he's a little more on the quiet side. So um, I think it was like I would have thought that maybe he would have been a captain, but then I heard that and I was like, oh, is he too quiet? But he's so experienced and seems to be a good teacher. So not really surprised there. So yeah, that's really all I have to add to that. There's a lot of them, a lot of
Right.
a lot of captains. That's unusual.
Yeah, I'd be interested in how I'd imagine they just give the whole team a ballot and maybe they're allowed like 5 picks and then whoever gets I don't know what the cutoff would be, but I'd imagine it's something like that. So that's going to wrap it up for this episode of All Things Mizzou podcast. Next time we record here, we'll have a starting quarterback, but we'll hear from Jinkwitz again on Tuesday. We'll hear from at least some of the captains. This was also one of the first things I thought of when they announced there was 9 captains, because usually every year we get a press conference before the season with every captain. I really have my doubts that they're going to give us 9 players in the same day. So we'll see how they go about that. But we'll hear from some players, some of the captains here as fall camp wraps up. So be sure to be on the lookout for that and all the rest of our coverage over at Missouri Tigers on SI.